We're delighted that Jo is with us to impart, I have no doubt, some excellent pearls of wisdom. And so without further ado, I'll hand over to our most excellent keynote speaker, Jo Gakonga. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That was a really, really lovely welcome. I'm feeling like I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to live up to all of that, but I'll do my best. So let's start over here. We're going to be talking about adjusting to the new normal. I think this is the scenario that probably most of us were in until pretty recently. This is what I do. I'm in the classroom, I'm with my learners, and this is my life. But what then probably happened in March is that you didn't think you were an online teacher, but actually maybe you became one. And this might have been suddenly quite a revelation for you, something you perhaps never thought you were going to be. Maybe you had no intention of being, maybe you really didn't want to be, but suddenly there wasn't a choice. So we've got a new environment and therefore perhaps new practices. Now, my feeling is that teaching online is not a different animal to teaching face-to-face, but it is a bit of a different species. There are some differences, of course. Some things about, just generally the managing the tech, but also perhaps about what works well online and what works well face-to-face and where the two things don't quite meet. So what I'd like to start with is this. What kind of issues have you faced? I'm guessing that most of you are teaching online or have had to go online at some point in the last 6 months. What kind of issues have you faced with teaching online? Just write it in the chat for me. Okay, I've got some really interesting things. Engaging learners, that's a big one, isn't it? You haven't got that sort of face-to-face presence that you have. Timing's difficult to plan. I've really noticed that. I find I can get half as much done online, perhaps, as I do, face-to-face. Getting a platform approved, that's really interesting. So all those things that you have to organise with your institutions. I know we've been told we can't use Zoom, it's got to be Teams, and Teams, frankly, is more difficult, I think, to manage. Students only have mobile phones. Oh, yes. Lack of non-verbals, so many things, inadequate tech from students. This really is an issue, I think. It's much easier to deal with this when you've got a big screen and you can have a couple of windows open. If you're dealing on a little screen, it is problematic, absolutely. The skills they need as well, absolutely. Limited bandwidth, yes. I mean, that can be an issue, can't it, with video? I think if you're teaching online, you've got video, it does make it much easier in lots of ways. It does feel a lot more personal. You've got that, it's easy to engage learners, I think. And if they can't do it because of limited bandwidth, that's a real problem. Speed, different platforms. Seems more teacher-centred, Callum. I would agree with you. I think it's really easy for that to happen. Delayed reaction times, yes. So all sorts of crikey. Internet crashing, of course, there you go. Lots of ones there. So safeguarding, okay, interesting. Falsely assume everyone can operate within the world of ICT. I can see that I've unleashed a wave here of issues that you've been thinking about and coming to terms with. So let's have a look at perhaps what you can do to adjust. Because all of these things are adjustments. As Pauline was just saying, every day is a school day. You've got to have a think about what you can do to adjust. And also, I'd like you to think about what have you done to adjust? What have you done to change your practice to accommodate those issues that we've just talked about? Again, can you maybe write some of those in the chat for me? What have you already done? Okay, Karen says smaller groups. That definitely, I think, makes things easier. But again, it's problematic, isn't it? From a logistic point of view, you've then got to deliver the same lesson twice, 3 times or whatever. Funding, yes. Familiarising, okay, Zoom training. So definitely the tech training, slowing down. That's a big one, I think. Expecting less has been one of my big lessons, I think. Materials, pre-lesson input, yes, absolutely, that's a really great idea. Using WhatsApp, Kahoot, quizzes. Okay, let's move on a little bit then. So I think that one of the things that you can do, there's some really good practical things there, but I think there are things about your own practice that perhaps you've had to change. I've certainly found that, as I've been teaching for over 30 years. 1989 I started. I am very old. And so, you kind of think, well, I've got it down pat pretty much. You never say never. You can always learn something. But essentially, I know how to deal with a classroom situation. But suddenly I started to do some ESOL teaching online. And I'd done quite a lot of teacher training online, but I hadn't done much ESOL teaching online. And I started to do that, fairly recently. And suddenly I thought, actually, there's a lot here to learn, a lot of adjusting that I need to do. And so I think investigating your own practice is a really good way of learning and adjusting. So you might ask, well, why bother? Everybody's kind of okay. It all sort of works. It's not such a problem. Why do I need to bother with all this? I would say that there are lots of benefits to reflective practice. And I think it's the sort of thing that we often talk about doing, but perhaps, but it is the sort of thing that we think, oh yeah, that's a good idea. But we don't actually find the time to do. But I think there are real benefits in reflective practice. So this is the big one for now. I think if you've got new situations and you're actually thinking and looking at what you do carefully and rigorously, then that will help you to adjust to new situations. It's a way in which you can do it in a systematic way, I think. I think it's also just good for you because I think it maintains your interest. You've probably been teaching, a long time, so probably longer than I have. And, it's a long road and I've done lots of different things. I'm sure you have too. Different classes, different levels, different situations. But if you're doing the same thing again and again, which you may do particularly towards the end of your career or middle of your career, whatever, then you may start just getting a bit burnt out. And I think that reflective practice can really help to maintain an interest in what you do, to keep you interested, to keep you on track, to make it a joy and a creative thing to do. John Fanslow says that you should try something different, that you should change something small, try something different and see what happens. And it doesn't matter what it is, it doesn't matter what you change, just change something and it will have an effect. And maybe that'll be a good effect, maybe it'll be a bad effect, but it will have an effect. And then reflect, and if it's good, then carry on, and if it isn't, then don't do it again, but at least change. And I think that for me is a really good message. Now, you might be saying this: I always reflect on my practice. I'm a good practitioner. And, look, you obviously are. You've got up on a Saturday morning to get up and, maybe you've just got out of bed and you're in your pyjamas, but you're still here and you've paid your money and you've come to a conference. And that speaks to the fact that you are clearly interested in your own development and you're serious about your career. Okay, but do you remember what went on accurately? Now, what a lot of you were saying was, I remember all the negatives. I'm sure that's true. But maybe those are the things that dominate, and that's not always an accurate picture. Even with those negatives, do you actually remember what went on accurately? And the truth is that we don't. None of us do. That's not the way our memories work. We have sort of hazy, reconstructed memories of what happened. And so what I think is, you've got to try and remember what you can't remember. What did you really say? You've got an idea of what you said, but what did you really say? What did you really do? I've got an idea, sort of remember it, but I'm not sure of the detail. And I think then that watching and listening back to your practice is incredibly powerful. Incredibly powerful. It's not comfortable, but it's very, very powerful. So I'm suggesting that you should record your online teaching. So it's very easy. I mean, this is one of the boons of online teaching, is it's super easy to record it. Obviously, you need to get your learners' permission, but I think if you tell them that you're doing it for your own development, they're unlikely to object. Tell them it's not going to go on YouTube, it's only for you, and you want to help yourself to be a better teacher. And I think there's very few people who object. If they do object, you can't do it. But I think that in my experience, learners don't mind that as long as they feel it's not going to be public. So it's easy to record a Zoom meeting, it's easy to record a Teams meeting. You can do this very straightforwardly. I would say it's really helpful. But I think we often don't do it. It's clearly quite uncomfortable. Nobody likes to watch them. Well, I mean, maybe I don't know, I'm saying nobody. I'm sure there are some, narcissistic people out there who would love to see themselves online, but it's not me. And I'm guessing it's not you. And mostly, I think most of us shrink from watching ourselves back on a video. Oh God, do I really look like that? Oh God, do I really talk like that? Oh God, did I really say that? I think those are kind of, one reason why we put it off. Can you think of any other reasons why we don't do this? Obviously, it's quite easy online. Most of you haven't done it, so why not? Why don't we? I think that the main reason is time. Time is a big one, of course. Motivation is a big one, or reluctance perhaps, and perhaps not having a structure to do it in. Now, the time issue, I can't help you with, I'm afraid. I'd love to be able to say that I can give you a time twister and make another 3 hours in your day, but I can't. What I would say is that actually we all have time to do what really interests us. I know that sounds really twee. I'm really busy, trust me. I get up at 5 in the morning and I work till 9 at night. I'm busy. And I'm a bit of a workaholic, and I should stop more, actually. I'm determined to have a day off tomorrow. But I think, we can all find time to do things. Put aside, you say, I'm going to spend 20 minutes. 20 minutes isn't a long time. I'm going to have a cup of tea, I'm going to spend 20 minutes, I'm going to do it. But you do have to find the time. And I know that that's difficult, and it's an easy thing to put on the bottom of your very long, probably, to-do list. So I'm not suggesting that's an easy problem. I know it's not. But if you find the time, then I can help you with the motivation and structure. That's what I'm planning to do today. That's my job in the next 20 minutes. I'd like to offer you 3 things to look for. So I'd like to suggest that you record yourself, that you listen. I'm only going to ask you to listen for 20 minutes. You don't even have to do 20. You could do 10. That would be enough. If you could even do 5. That would be enough. But something. If you tell me you can't find 5 minutes in your day, I'm sorry, I do find that hard to believe. Okay? So go on, tell me, that anybody, put in the chat for me, I can't find 5 minutes in my day. So if I've convinced you of that, then let me give you 3 things to listen for, 3 things to look for that perhaps will focus your attention. These aren't the only 3 things, of course they're not, but if I give you these 3 things and you've got something to start with, then maybe that gives you the motivation to carry on and look for more. I hope. That's my plan anyway. That's my greater scheme. So let's see how it goes. Number 1. Here we go. Number 1. That's the big one, isn't it? That's the one that we all suffer from. Well, maybe we don't all. I'm sure there are people who don't, but I do. I do. I put my hand up very high for this one. I'm really prone to this. And it's the most common problem that I see in trainee and in more experienced teachers. So want to put your hand up? Any thoughts about talk? Oops, sorry. Any thoughts about talk? So, we know that this can be an issue. And it's as I was saying before, I think, there's one thing to think, well, I know that this is an issue. And there's another thing to really listen to what you actually say and, how you do it, so that you can think, well, what makes me talk too much? What is it that triggers that? What could I do about it? And I think taking a smaller portion of your lesson and listening to it, not just thinking, I talk too much, is different and will allow you to see a way forward to change. So what I'm going to suggest that you do, I'm going to give you a little challenge. I'd like you to listen to 20 minutes of your lesson. 10 if you like. If you can't do 20, 10's okay. But 20's, you can probably string a cup of tea out over 20 minutes. It might be a bit cold by the end. 15 if you like, don't mind, but an amount of time. And all I want you to do, watch it and time yourself. Every minute, on the minute, write down just a tick in a box. Am I speaking or are they speaking? And if they're speaking, who's speaking? Or are they in pairs, for example? So every minute, on the minute, don't cheat. Don't think, oh, well, I'm just talking there, but actually, 2 seconds later they're in pairs. Don't cheat. Do it accurately. Every minute, on the minute. Am I speaking? Am I speaking to this? Is it one other person speaking? If so, who? Because you'll probably find that, your more dominant learners are talking more. Or are they in pairs? Or groups or whatever. Okay. This might be quite an eye-opener. But I think it also gives you that way of focusing. Think, well, if it's me speaking for 18 of those minutes, then, how could I change it? How could I, adjust that? How could I have changed that bit so that it was more about them? And we all know language teaching, language learning is a practical skill. You've got to have the ability to do it, the opportunity to do it. You've got to get in the pool and swim. Doesn't matter if you're floundering around, you've got to try, because if you don't, you won't learn to swim. You won't learn to speak. And as we know, we're ESOL teachers. We know that they're out there and they've got all that opportunity to speak English, but often they don't, the opportunity isn't there. They do live with their families. They do work with other people who, especially now in lockdown, they do work with other people who speak their language, and they don't have the opportunity actually often to speak. So it is important in the class that they have the opportunity to try and to practice. Have a go. So we all know it's likely that that's going to be a wake-up call. It would be for me too. It is for me. I know I do this sort of thing for my own purposes, and I'm always shocked by how much I speak. So how can we reduce teacher talk? How can we increase learner interaction online? As you say, not having that sort of warm, fuzzy, we're all in the class together feeling perhaps makes it worse for the learners, more difficult for the learners to speak. So what can we do? Breakout rooms is the big one for me. I mean, it's helpful. You get the learners used to it. If they have to be in there, then they're more likely to talk than in a bigger group. I think we've said all of this. So, utilise that. I really think it's a really good opportunity. Found some things like, you've got to remember to, if they've got a task to do, please take a picture of this before you go in the breakout rooms. Those kind of things really help to make sure that the breakout rooms will work. Using the chat box. Again, you've got a problem, as I'm doing now with you, you've got a problem that the fast typists will be the ones who tend to dominate. So another little thing that I often do is to ask people, write in the chat box, but don't post it yet. Write it, I'll post a question, I'll ask you a question, write it in the chat box, don't post it yet. And then when I say go, post it, everyone gets to post it. So that can be a way of ensuring that everybody gets an even chance to participate. Using the board, using the whiteboard or annotating PowerPoint slides or whatever so that they can interact more. I found that's really helpful, actually. Everybody can interact, everybody can write something. I have had some learners who are working on phones who found that difficult, so the tech might be an issue there. But certainly if they're working on a tablet or a PC or whatever, then that I think has been really helpful for me. Made people feel more make people interact more. Write on paper and hold it up. If you're having trouble because the tech's low, then, they're only on their phone, get them to write, tell them to write, clearly, big letters, big pen, on a paper and hold it up to the screen. That's another way in which you could do it in a sort of more low-tech way. I've seen that work effectively. Shared Google Docs. These are so helpful. I've just made a little video. Last week I made a little video about this, and I've been using this quite a bit, and I really, really like it. So if you share the link to a Google Doc that anybody can edit, make sure you put it so that anyone can edit it, share that in the chat, Everybody goes onto the Google Doc. You can give them specific areas, put their names on the Google Doc before so that they know where to write. Everybody can write. You can see everybody writing in real time. You can comment on everybody's in real time. You can still talk to them. You can still have your microphone off and on and talk to them while they're doing it. I've found that is super helpful for getting them interacting. It is writing and not speaking, but I've found that a great tool. Number 2. So first one, I want you to record yourself. Number 2, I want you to think about the questions that you ask. Now, do you ask open or closed questions? So the other kind of questions are display or referential questions. So display questions are the ones that, as a teacher, I know the answer to. Do we use the present perfect here for experience or for something that happened at a specific time in the past? I know the answer to that. It's a display question. I want to know if they know. Or a referential question, something like, what did you do on holiday? I don't know what you did on holiday. It's a genuine question. Now, with all of these questions, so we ask a lot of questions. That's what we do in class. All of these questions, different types of questions serve different types of purposes. I am not saying that open questions are better than closed questions, that display questions are better than referential questions, or the other way around. They all serve a purpose. But I think that awareness of the purpose is key, because often what we tend to do is use closed questions and display questions rather than open questions and referential questions. So again, a little task for you, 20 minutes, another 20 minutes, a different lesson perhaps. Note every question that you ask. And all you've got to do is say whether it's an open question or a closed question, display question or referential question. Make yourself some kind of chart like that. Okay? Is it an open display question or is it a closed display question? Is it a referential open question? So an open referential question might be, what did you do on holiday? Whereas a closed referential question might be, did you go to Bournemouth? So it could be one or the other. Obviously, that goes into those 4 categories. Again, 20 minutes. If you can't do 20 minutes, do 10. It's fine. Could do with the same bit of text, with another extract, maybe the next week. Maybe have this as your second week task. But every question that you ask, you can make a note of the questions. That's quite interesting too, but you don't even have to. Just look at that and see where you tend to ask questions and think about why you ask those questions. So I think that's another useful one, because questions can be a really good way of getting people involved. So reducing that talk. Third one, and I'm going to rush through this because I'm running out of time. I think another useful thing is, what's the visual experience for your learners like online? As we've said, a lot of them are working on a small screen, and it's the visual experience is really important online, I think, because you want to engage them, and one way you can engage them is to make it look pretty. It does, it is important. It's the same way that you might, wear decent clothes instead of scruffy jeans to class, perhaps, or comb your hair. It's, there's something of the making them feel like this is a welcome, interesting, engaging environment. And I think it's more important online. Checklist, images and text. So images are really important. Use great pictures. It's really easy to do, and they're copyright free. Pixabay has hundreds of thousands of copyright free images, beautiful images, really good quality images. You can use them for anything, including including commercial stuff. You don't have to cite who they were from, nothing. They're all free. It's what I tend to use. Morgue File's also good. Unsplash is also good. So there's 3 sites with hundreds of pictures, thousands of pictures, used in great images. Text can act as a visual too. I think you have to think about the font and the size. It really makes a difference what you use. And screen size, as we've talked about, a lot of the learners are going to be using a mobile phone. So picture's going to be good, less text is going to be good, and more slides. So if you're making a PowerPoint for this, then have great pictures, have the text, but have the text on 2 or 3 slides rather than on 1. It'll make it bigger for them, it'll make it easier for them to see. Canva also is a fantastic site that I just love. You can do really lovely design stuff with this very easily, and there is a paid version, but the free version is more than adequate. So I'd really recommend that one. If you want to use animations, PowerPoint Spice also. She has lots and lots of free stuff that's really, really great and useful. The one other thing I wanted to say, I suppose, was don't forget when you're looking through these things, when you're looking at the 20 minutes and counting, and counting who was talking at the minute, when you're counting your questions, when you're looking at your visual images and thinking about how you could make those better, or how much text did you have on slide, do also think about things that you were pleased about, that you liked. It's important to note those too, I think. So thank you all very much for your participation. It was great, some fantastic ideas there. And if you'd like to contact me, then that's my email address. I'd be really happy to hear any thoughts that you have.